Frank Martinez was 62 years old when the young officers started calling him Fossil Frank behind his back. 28 years on the force, and suddenly he was the punchline. Too slow, too old-fashioned, too stuck in his ways. But on March 15, 2019, when an armed man burst into Riverside Elementary with a loaded weapon, those same officers watched Fossil Frank transform into something they'd only heard whispered about in the locker room: the hammer. This is the true story of the day mockery turned into respect, and an old cop reminded everyone why experience matters. Frank had been a school resource officer for 3 years. It was supposed to be his gentle glide into retirement, greeting kids, teaching safety assemblies, maybe breaking up the occasional cafeteria argument. The younger officers at the precinct saw it as a demotion. Babysitting duty, they called it. Detective Mike Chun, 29, was the worst offender. "Hey, Fossil," he'd say during morning briefings, "try not to throw your back out chasing those dangerous second graders." The squad room would erupt in laughter. Frank would just smile, sip his coffee, and say nothing. But what Mike and the others didn't know was that Frank Martinez had a past. Before the quiet school hallways, before the desk duty, Frank had been one of the most decorated tactical officers in the state. They called him the Hammer back then, not because he was brutal, but because when chaos erupted, Frank was the tool that drove everything back into place. Precise, powerful, unflinching. He'd retired that version of himself on purpose. After 25 years of breaking down doors and facing down armed suspects, Frank wanted peace. He wanted to help kids feel safe, not afraid. He wanted to end his career building something, not tearing things down. It was a Tuesday morning, sunny and unremarkable. Frank was helping a third grader tie her shoe near the front entrance when he heard the glass doors crash open. A man in his 30s, wild-eyed and sweating, stumbled into the lobby. Frank saw the gun immediately, a 9mm, held loosely but deliberately in the man's right hand. "Everyone get out!" the man screamed. "I need to find my son." "They took my son." The school secretary froze. The third graders started crying. Parents dropping off their kids, scattered in panic. Frank's body made a decision before his mind caught up. He stepped directly between the gunman and the hallway leading to the classrooms. 700 children were down that hall. "Sir," Frank said, his voice calm and even, "my name is Frank. I'm here to help you. But I need you to lower that weapon. No." The man's hand shook violently. "My wife took him? She won't let me see him. He's in there somewhere." Frank could see it now. This wasn't a mass shooter. This was a father in crisis, probably dealing with a custody dispute, possibly off his medication, definitely dangerous. The man's finger was on the trigger. One wrong move, one loud noise, and someone would die. Frank heard Principal Morrison triggering the lockdown alarm. Good. The kids would be safe in their classrooms. But Frank was now standing less than 15 feet from an armed, unstable man with nothing between them but air and bad decisions. "I have 3 kids," Frank said, taking one small step forward. 2 boys and a girl. "I know what it feels like when you can't see them. When you feel like the system is against you. That pain is real, brother. That pain is valid." The man's eyes flickered with recognition. Someone was listening. "But here's the thing," Frank continued, his voice firm but compassionate. "Your son isn't in this building. I know every kid here. We can call the school he actually attends right now. We can get you help. We can fix this. But not with that gun in your hand. You're lying." The man raised the weapon, pointing it directly at Frank's chest. This was the moment. Frank had been here before that split second where time crystallizes and every choice leads to life or death. The young officers at the precinct thought the hammer was about violence. They were wrong. The hammer was about control, about reading the chaos and knowing exactly where to strike. Frank didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he did something that will be taught in police academies for years to come. He showed the man his empty hands and said, "Shoot me if you have to." But those kids don't deserve to hear that sound. Your son doesn't deserve a father in prison for murder. And you, sir, you deserve better than this moment defining the rest of your life. The man's hand trembled. Tears streamed down his face. I just want to see my boy, he whispered. I know, Frank said, and we're going to make that happen. But first, you need to give me that gun. Frank extended his hand. For 5 seconds, an eternity, nothing happened. Then slowly, shakily, the man lowered the weapon. Frank closed the distance in 2 swift steps, secured the firearm, and gently guided the man to the ground. No shots fired. No one hurt. Within minutes, backup arrived and the man was taken for psychiatric evaluation. The video footage went viral within the department. Then it hit the local news. Then national coverage. Within a week, Frank Martinez was being interviewed on Good Morning America. The commissioner personally called to commend him. Parents wrote letters. Teachers cried thanking him. But the most important moment happened 3 days later in the precinct locker room. Detective Mike Chun approached Frank's locker. His cocky smile was gone. Frank, I owe you an apology, Mike said quietly. I was wrong. About everything. Frank looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a young officer who was scared of becoming obsolete, who confused experience with weakness. Mike, Frank said, you're a good cop. You're fast, you're sharp, you're hungry. But here's what I learned in 28 years. Being good at this job isn't about being the toughest or the quickest. It's about knowing when to draw your weapon and when to extend your hand. It's about seeing the person behind the crisis. That doesn't come from a training manual. It comes from years of making mistakes, learning, and choosing compassion over ego. Mike nodded, his eyes wet. Can I buy you a coffee? Maybe you could tell me some stories? Frank smiled. I'd like that. The nickname, Fossil Frank, disappeared that day. Some officers started calling him the Hammer again, but Frank preferred something simpler. The young recruits now just called him Sir. Experience isn't about age. It's about wisdom earned through time, mistakes, and choices. In a world obsessed with youth and speed, Frank Martinez proved that sometimes the most powerful response isn't the fastest one. It's the most measured. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who knows they don't have to prove it. If this story touched you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. What's a time when experience mattered more than speed in your life? Drop your story in the comments below. And subscribe to Soul Relief Stories for more real-life tales of courage, redemption, and wisdom. Remember, every person has a story, and every story has power. See you in the next one.